Yeah, I'm live on Facebook. What are we doing here? Over here, we're doing this.
Was it?
Oh, actually,
Almost done. And we can start.
okay, we have someone on Zoom. Okay, whoever you are on Zoom, I see you're muted and visual off. That's good. If you have anything to say, please do so.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, who is that?
Oh, my name is Golda. I joined from California. I saw an ad on Facebook.
Yeah, hi.
That's Esther's ad. You know Esther? You know Golda from California? Esther?
I don't know which Golda were.
Golda who?
Golda Moldavsky. Esther Friedman posted this, so I just joined.
Yeah, it's in
I don't
my
even
house.
know. Hi.
So the class is here at Esther Freeman's house.
Oh, nice.
So that's what
Yeah, I know her from like years and years and years ago, and she posted it on Facebook, so I thought I'd join.
Welcome.
Excellent.
So happy you joined.
First of all, you gave us a good sound test. We can hear you well, and you can apparently hear us.
Nice.
So I'm gonna mute yourself, and because otherwise it gets pretty fuzzy when people start talking. But do come in, please, when you need to. Okay.
Almost done.
So we have a couple of people on Facebook.
Amazing. Okay. Seems like somebody was here. I don't know why they didn't come in.
There wasn't anyone here when I came. We'll leave it alone. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Go live in a minute. With the
Okay, guys,
downstairs
we're
door,
almost
or
ready. Almost ready.
Downstairs is open?
Yeah, I left downstairs open also.
Just now or before?
When I came in. Did you close
So
it?
it might, I don't know.
All right, we're going to start in a few minutes. So while we're waiting, I don't know if all of you got the message. The text for tonight is the Tanya Hayichud, the second part of the Tanya.
All right. Mo's here.
Mo! From upstate. Mo from upstate?
Hey, well,
Not yet,
starting
almost.
Thursday
Not yet.
morning. I'm leaving Thursday morning.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay, let me just start this and then we'll go live. You can sit right there if you want. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. And we are live on Facebook.
All right.
Take this out of the way. Okay.
All right? So the subject of tonight's class is Who Am I? The Foundations of Jewish Identity. And I haven't really decided if this is a one class, a two class, or what part. But we'll see how it goes tonight. And we'll take it from there. As I said, our text is Shaar Ve'emunah. So do you have, you got, Esther, you have
want me to
it?
get a Tanya here?
No, I have printed. Here's the printer for you.
Okay. Here, Mo.
I hope
Thank
people
you.
out there have text. I did put it in the Citizen K group, and not everybody is in that group. Nevertheless, a lot of folks happen to have Tanyas, right? I hope. So, the beginning of Shaar Ve'emunah. First of all, what is Shaar Ve'emunah? It's literally the gate to unity and faith. And in small print, it's written what the purpose of this little piece, this section of Tanya is. And we'll read it in Hebrew and translate. Lahavim, to understand Ma'at Mizeh a little bit, Mashikosa b'Zohar, what's written in the Zohar. And the Zohar says, the Shema Yisroel, the pasuk Shema Yisroel Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Hu Yehud Elah, is the upper level of unity. And Baruch Shem Kaved Malchus Le'elam Voed, the little sentence after that, before V'ahavta, is Yehuda Tata. I'm going to very briefly explain the difference between Yehuda Tata and Yehuda Allah, and then ask myself and all of us the question, what has this got to do with who am I, and what am I, and what's my purpose? But in simple terms, as simple as I can explain it, they're both Yehuda. Yehuda means Yichud, unity. It actually means singularity. So Yehuda Allah is the perspective, as you say, the upper perspective. It's a perspective from above to below, that everything is really singular. Really, what I mean really? In essence, everything is really singular and comes from a singular source and fans out, so to speak, into what's perceived as multiplicity. So the perspective of Yehuda Allah is multiplicity is secondary and singularity, uniqueness, is primary. That's God's perspective. Our perspective, Yehuda Tata, which is the view from bottom up, if that was the view from top down, is there is real multiplicity. I mean, we know it, right? We can touch it. It's in front of us. We see it. There is real multiplicity, but we understand that behind that real multiplicity is a singularity. So, before I go further, anybody have a question? What's Yehuda Tata? What's Yehuda Allah? Again, very simply, Yehuda Tata, Yehuda Allah is the perspective from Hashem, where He is the entity, that is the entity and the allness.
There's a very simple question.
Yeah. A very simple question.
If you just said that Shema represents the higher
Yes.
unity and Baruch Shem represents the lower unity, and the difference is the higher unity is how they see the singularity from above to
How
below.
God sees the world,
Right?
right?
And the lower unity is our perspective,
How we see God from our perspective.
how we see it.
Yeah.
Then why are we not supposed to say Baruch Shem? We have to whisper it, and it's only a prayer from Malachim to voice out loud. If Baruch Shem represents the lower unity, which is our perspective.
It's a very good question. A very good question, and it's answered much, much later in Shaar. The question is, why do we whisper it? Why is it quiet?
Yeah.
And another question you could ask is, why do we have to say it at all? In the earlier days, it evolved that Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchus Le'elam Voed, was sandwiched between the Shema and V'ahavta. And the answer to both is the same, really, which is that as the generations fell, and as darkness became more prevalent, darkness meaning spiritual darkness as opposed to physical darkness, so we had to, on the one hand, that spiritual darkness is not nearly as, the spirituality that's in darkness is a hidden spirituality. It's a quiet spirituality. Baruch Shem Kaveh Malchus Le'elam is quiet. It doesn't scream godliness. On the contrary, it screams multiplicity. It screams materiality. It screams stuff. God is quiet. So that's one piece on the quietness of it. The second piece is that it describes a state, which is the state that we're in, where godliness is hidden. And one of the answers we'll get to, tonight we're going to talk about who we are. Later we're going to talk about what's our purpose. But before we understand what's our purpose, we have to know how we're constituted. In other words, if someone delivered a car in front of your house, and he said, "Wow, hey, lady, look at this," and you said, "Well, what is it? I'm from planet Mars, and I never saw anything like this in my life." So to know what this is for, you have to understand how to work it, and what's it constitute, what constitutes it. So we're going to move. I hope I answered your question. Yeah. Okay, good. And my question, the question that I asked myself when I started to think about what text do I want to start with to start on the subject of who am I? Who am I, Avram Cameron? That's my name. There are a lot of names around the table. But is that who I am? Well, it's my name. But I think I'm a lot more than, I don't know what that name really conveys to anybody, right? Does it tell anybody who I am? And when I think about myself, I want to know, yeah, who I am, but I also want to know what am I for? What's my purpose? Like that car. What's it for? I have no idea. I'm from a womb. I emerged from a womb, and nobody told me anything. They sent me to school, and nobody told me really what that was about. You know, it was really late in my life that I discovered that I had to do something besides get 99s on tests. I mean, I don't know about other people, but when you look at your own life in your own way, when did you or have you ever, I hope we have, discovered not only how we're built and what we're built with and what our purpose is, but what's our tachlis? What's the end game? So to start with what's the end game, we're going to start with the beginning game, which is what are we? What is this person made of? What's its constitution? What's its place in relation to everything else? So we're going to take the perspective not so much of who we are individually at the table and what roles we have, but really what is the foundation? What is the foundation of what we are and who we are? So this is expressed not so much very openly on the pages that we're about to learn, but we're going to talk through it. Okay, so having said that, V'yadaita hayom, Perek says, you should know, and he's speaking to each one of us. The Torah is speaking to us, as a pasuk in Devarim. You, each one of us out there, in here, at the table, have to know. Hayom, today. Today means now. You have to know now, right now, tonight. V'hashevasa elevavecha, and place this upon your heart. Now, this small little piece is a huge mouthful of Chassidus, right? The first mouthful is that knowing, knowing, is not intellectualizing. It's getting your heart to understand what you are and who you are. So eliminating the disparity between what you think about yourself, or what you think might be your role, or what you might think you were supposed to do, versus what your heart may be telling you. And sometimes there's a fair amount of conflict. So one thing we want to talk about here is that the head and the heart need to be integrated. That's the foundational piece in understanding who you are. That there's a sense in you, and you can recognize it when it occurs, because there's a sense of peacefulness. There's a quietude. When you know, and that knowledge of what you are is entrenched in your heart, put it on your heart, so then there's a sense of integration. And that's a very abstract word, but there's a sense of wholeness. So who we are is meant to be a being that feels itself as whole with itself, whole with its relationships, whole with its community, and ultimately whole with the cosmos. So that's where we start with Yehuda, right? The perspective Yehuda Allah. There's a perspective that can be cultivated by each of every one of us, that everything that is only godly. It's a perspective that needs to be cultivated. And all the stuff that is, including me and you and everybody around this table and in Facebook and Zoom, though we are really singular individual entities, we share a commonality, which is the singular source from which we all came. This was a huge subject of ours when we a few weeks ago on the nature of Ahavas Yisroel. But we won't go there. Ahavas Yisroel is based on the premise that all of our individualities roll up into a singularity, which is the soul, the source of all God of souls up above. So, know in your head and put it on your heart. What? Ki Havaya hu Elokim. Havaya. 4 letters. Yud Ke Vav Ke. Is Elokim. And what is that? Is that redundant? I mean, in some Sidurim, they make in English, they make a very big point to make sure that the Lord is God, or the God is the Lord. Well, there's certainly two words here. And for most people, Elohim means God, and Havaya is also a name of God. But clearly, because there's two names, there are two different expressions. So the name Havaya is spelled out Yud Kei Vav Kei. Many, many things that can be said about it, but the one thing I'll say at the beginning is Yud Kei Vav Kei can be broken up into Yud Haveh, a simple letter, Yud, which brings everything into Haveh, into being. Right? Every simple letter, a dot, from which everything comes into being. And that is Elohim. Elohim is from the Lashon, as brought in Yechezkel, Ele ha'oretz, the strong ones of the earth. Our strength, our power, comes from a level which is singular, a Yud, and which brings into being everything, including ourselves. So first point, who are we? We are expressions of godliness. We're expressions of a singular power. And we have powers to utilize. We have Eli Ha'oretz. We are powerful things in this world, sourced in the ultimate unity. And it's just a matter of learning what are your powers, how to tap your powers, and how to direct your powers. But again, tonight we're mainly exploring what we are, who we are, not so much yet the tachlis, meaning what's our purpose. Questions so far? Okay. So put it up on your heart, take it, internalize, feel it, that this little point of singularity, which is the essence of God, has brought everything into being, and from that everything we take power, where that's our Elohim. And know that b'shemayim al, in the heavens and above, and in the earth below, mitachos ein oid, there is nothing else. Nothing else. We, the we that we are really nothing beside an expression of God. That's, if you were taking notes, that's sort of the first point. Know that you are an expression of God. Because in the heaven, in earth, and in the heavens above, and the earth below, there is no other. So now the Alter Rebbe asks the question. But sort of lahovim, we need to understand. The kisala al daitaka, would it ever rise up in your mind, sheyesh elakim nishra b'mayim, that there are gods or a God dwelling in the water, mitachos la'oretz, underneath the earth, lahazir kol kach, that this chumash, the Bible, has to warn us, don't go there, and take it to heart. Would you ever think differently? Well, let's put the question out there. We have live people here and virtual people there. Would it ever rise up in your mind that there are gods in the heavens above besides the singular entity called Hashem?
Hard to be objective at this point after learning so much.
It is?
It's a hypothetical. Doesn't work.
It doesn't work?
But of course it's possible, because look at the world, look at the history. There's been plenty of people who have worshipped other gods. There still are. So
right.
It's
So from that perspective, the answer is yes. A person does have to be. Right?
a person, not me.
Okay, we'll go ancient history.
I know a fair amount of pagans.
Huh?
So I know a fair amount of people.
Sure.
You do?
I know a lot of
That's
pagans.
interesting,
I
Levy.
mean, that's an interesting thing. Paganism is back. Paganism is back. It's like it's
Right.
a culture, a cult and a culture. And people are into it. Sure. And they're just hardly talking ancient history. There was a god in the Greek and Roman hierarchy of things, Neptune. Neptune was the god of the fish and the god of the sea. And he was a relative, I think a brother, if I'm not mistaken, of two other gods, Jupiter and Pluto. Jupiter was the god of the heavens, and Pluto was the god of the underworld, the gangster, the deep, dark sea. Right? So it would rise up in your mind to think such a thing. Okay, good. So that's why we're learning this. Okay? And if it were so simple, we'd say, no, we don't know. There's no such thing. It never rise up in our minds. So what do you have to have this red chapter, this whole book about? All right? Well, even if you do believe in God, that God's a creator, right? Does that tell you anything about who you are? God created me. Well, the next page, this page, will tell you about who you are in relationship to the whole process of creation. Okay? I think it's weird, I look at these videos after they're done, and the angle that I'm at, I'm always looking like I'm looking way over there.
Right.
Still get it right.
Well, can we also move this to the side so that whatever?
Yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Because people are saying they can't
What do you
hear,
want?
but I can. When I turn this up,
They say we can't hear. Well, maybe my volume here is not good.
you can hear on my phone. It's just maybe it's not that as loud as it could be. I don't know.
Yeah, well, my volume wasn't so good. Maybe that should be a little better because I turned my volume up. You get a sign from anybody?
No. Yeah, people are watching, but they're saying it's hard to hear. I don't know. Maybe
Just
my
maybe
mic
your
is not as
microphone.
loud.
Want to move your microphone closer? Can you
It
do
can. It can. There's a wire. It doesn't go that much longer. But
All right, I'll try to speak loud.
okay, it's fine.
Okay?
What I'll do is I'll do something else. Yeah. Just put this on there.
Wait a minute. Hold on
No,
here.
you don't have to move anywhere. It's totally fine. I'll just move it on the table.
Oh, that gives you more wire.
It'll give me, yeah. Give more wire. There we go.
You're getting some messages.
That's me?
Well, I can move this a little bit to the side.
Yeah, maybe that's
I'm
it.
blocking this.
This should be louder.
Okay, so
Okay, Mo.
We've got a
let's
question.
try it this way, and you guys can give me some feedback
Okay.
if it's better.
It's just,
Okay, well, yeah, here's one, Jonathan.
Hi, Mom.
Jonathan, now it's better. Nice to see you guys, Jonathan. Beautiful. Okay. So, let's start the trip. Okay? Who are we? What are we? All right. Hina Kasiv, it's written a pasuk. The pasuk says, La'olam Hashem devorach nisa b'shamayim. This is a pasuk from Tehillim, and it means that eternally Hashem, your word is standing in the heavens. Right? God spoke. That's the metaphor that we use in the Torah for creation. God spoke. V'yedaber Hashem, He spoke the Torah. V'yemer, He said the 10 utterances. And the pasuk in Tehillim says this word that you spoke is not really past tense. It's always being spoken. It's standing continually, always in the heavens. And the Baal Shem Tov, the holy Baal Shem Tov, he said upon this, Ki devorecha she'amarta, the word that you said, Yehirakia, let there be a firmament, v'soich hamayim, within the middle of the waters, etc. He said, from the fact that David HaMelech told us that the word is standing forever, so the Baal Shem Tov said that the words, the tevus and the oisius, the words and the letters that you spoke, are really still being spoken. They're standing in the heavens of the firmaments of the heavens. And they are invested in and clothed in all the levels of the evolution of worlds downward. Forever, to enliven them. So the first point that this teaches about who we are, God speak is the source of everything. God speak. Now, God doesn't really speak, right? So we understand it's a metaphor. And the metaphor understood in Chassidus, we've probably spoken about this before, is just like speech is the way that you, on the inside, communicate to something on the outside. It's the expression of who you are inside to someone on the outside. So God's speech is that way. But here, we're understanding something quite a bit deeper. That all the things in the creation come from God's speech. That means we are being spoken. We sitting around this table, we out there, are being spoken into existence by God speak every second of our existence. Just like the heavens would revert to nothing, the earth would revert to nothing, we would be sucked back up into zero. If it weren't for the fact that the speech of God, meaning the energies of godliness, are being blown into us every single moment. So that gives us a little insight. Our essence of who we are is we're really godly. Really everything is godly, right? But we are godly. We feel material. We feel separate. We have pain. We have pleasure. We have doubts. We have concerns. We have worries. and we're all godly. So how do we take that fact and bring it down from a piece of information, which we just got, into our heart? That's what he said right at the beginning, right? You should know in your head, well, we're beginning to know it a little bit, and then put it in your heart. So that's something we'll talk about in this series. How to realize, how to be what we really are. Godly entities, godly creatures. So, and we'll go any but enough. Since speech is communicated, conveyed through letters and words, so we are a bunch of letters. Each one of us. Our names, we learned that our names in Hebrew are letters, particular combinations of letters which express who we really are. Without going into it, and we won't, because we got a lot of different people out there. We're not going to start. We did this once actually in a talk that I gave. Just random people around the table throwing out their names, and we could talk about what the name means. But we'll hold that back for the time being. But the letters of your name and the name as it becomes a word is an indicator. Not only an indicator, it's a signpost for something that's going on inside of you. Okay. If the heavens and the earth are like that, then everything is like that. Everything is composed of what we call metaphorically letters and speech, energetics, energies from the essence of God, which create everything. And these letters are standing, they're standing forever in the heavens, and they're enclosed within the entirety of the heavens and the earth to keep them in existence. The line begins, if you're looking at the Tanya, la'olam, forever, la'chiesim, to enliven them. Because you can see this is written, v'davar elokeinu yokum la'olam. It's a pasuk also. The word of God, meaning elokeinu, elokeinu again meaning power, the forces of godliness that exist, that are exuded from the essence, stand forever. V'daborav chayim v'kayomim la'ad, and your words are living and extant all the time. Because if these letters, meaning again, if godly energetic were to depart, the infusion of godliness were to depart for a second from any one of us or from anything, everything would return to its source. All of the heavens and we would be revert to nothing. And everything would be as if it never existed, which is an interesting note to say, because what we did exist, now we don't exist. Mm-hmm. But when everything's sucked back into the state, quote, before, by the way, it's interesting to get used to it, Chassidus, before and after are used as before is deeper and after is more external. Because time before and after is a creation. So if you revert to the stage before creation, both time and place are created. I mean, think about this. What is time? Time is movement in space. It takes this amount of time to get from here to there. Where the hands of the clock mark something and they have to move, right? So there's an intertwining between time and place. And time and place are both creation. So if you revert to the place before creation, meaning deeper than creation, there has been no time. And so it will be like we never existed. Not that we would care about it,
right,
because we never would have been in the first place, but just a fact to know. Right?
You remember I brought up one time the book Heaven Exposed by Tzvi Freeman?
I remember you brought it
and
up.
how there was one little skit. Do you ever read that book? Heaven Exposed? So there's one little part in the book where like it's talking about things coming Yesh Mei Ayin and everything's Dvar Hashem and the words of Hashem coming through, creating everything. Mm-hmm. And the Malachim are talking amongst themselves how this operates and works. And then they like have like this globe, as if like there's a world in this side of this globe. He makes skits out of these mm-hmm. stories. So there's a man playing near a tree. No, there's a man there just randomly, and he's like, "Hey, what am I doing here?" And then the Malachim call out to him and say, "How long have you existed for?" "Oh, 40-something years," you know. And then they just randomly put a tree there, and then they ask him like, well, like, tell us about this tree. Oh, well, when I was younger, I played on it. He has a whole history and a story with this tree, and they said to him, like, what if we told you that it was just created? She's like, that's impossible. It's been here my whole life. So it's kind of like that idea of like that Hashem is recreating everything every single moment with the same utterances, and if like everything could just disappear in an instant.
Right. Everything could return to ayin ve'efes, absolutely nothing.
What's the difference between ayin and efes?
What's the difference between ayin and efes? Okay. Excellent question.
Okay.
Ayin is really something, and efes is really nothing. What do we mean by that? Maybe I'll just leave it like that. Everyone will figure it out. Okay. Ayin is the stuff of creation before it takes any form whatsoever and has any ability to be recognized at all. It's called ayin. The true ayin, all right, I'll put this out, this is a little paradox in itself, but hopefully it'll mean something, or this will confuse you more. God creates, remember we had this, he creates top down, right? He creates top down. He creates a yesh down here below from ayin. He creates a yesh from the ayin. So efes is nothing. Efes is just zippa. Ayin is something. So you can't use that to create if it's not nothing, if it's just nothing. So why do we call it ayin? Because it's unfathomable, inscrutable, invisible to us down here below. So from our perspective, it's called ayin. He creates yesh from ayin, right? And our job is just the reverse. To take our yeshishness and peel it away until we have some window into the ayin. So the ayin is huge, and efes is nothing. Yesh ayin. Everything would revert. On the one hand, let's take the efes first. Everything would completely disappear, be zippo, but it can't disappear because there's no such thing really as disappearing. Its state can change, and its state will change as it appears. As if you could watch this happening, you'd watch it disappear, and you'd have to know that it's going back to the ayin, which is the everything. Unless you're a navi or a magician, or you've really, you really got it. Then you have some glimpse into the ayin. Okay, so that's the point. So let's look now. What does it got to do with me? So far, because I'm just all of us are part of this creation. We like to think of us. We are certain in the hierarchy of things. Yeah, we are much more sentient than a stone, right? But in a certain way, in the way we're speaking here, we're very much equal to the stone, in the sense that we exist just like the stone exists, from the effusion of what's called God speak, that keeps us in existence, is the same effusion, different letters. We'll talk about the letters soon, but it's the same energetic. It's words and speech which keep the stone in existence. So this is just point number one. Who are we fundamentally? Right? We're calling this place the foundation of Jewish identity. So far, I haven't gotten into anything Jewish, by the way. We're talking about all of creation. Who we are, all of creation, is just a word of God. Well, can I have a word with you? Yeah, you can have a word with me, and that word is what's creating me. And that's what we are. And if God were to stop speaking that effusion, everything would revert to nothing. And it would be as if it never had existed at all. Before he spoke, when he said Yehirakia, when he said let there be a firmament, and all the other things. And now he says it kind of openly, but as I say, this is not really open when you learn Shaar and Muna, because he's going to say V'chein b'chol haberurim, all creatures. That includes us, right? Shebechol ha'olamis, in all the worlds, higher and lower, Even this physical world, and even the inanimate stuff, the dirt in this world, if the God speaks, the energetic which gives rise to their particular form and being, were to be departed from them in a moment at all, these oisius me'asora maimoris, the 10 utterances, right? He created in 10 utterances. He or, let there be light, etc., etc. And I'm going to stop here for a moment, about 10. The human being, the name for the human being in the Torah is Adam. Aleph Daled Mem. It's a name for the first human on the planet. His name was Adam. Now, Adam can be explained in many different ways. Why is he called Adam? Because the one I want to focus on, if you take the word Adam apart, it's Aleph, Dam. Aleph, Dam. The letter Aleph is a word. Aluf. You'll read in Bereshis the Alufai Esav, the chieftains of the who belong to the congregation of Esav. Alufai Edom. And so Alufai means chief. So what? The chief energetic is in the blood. Dam is blood. So Alufai, Aleph, all the power is in the blood. But Aleph is also the first, right? Number one. Number one is Hashem Echad, one. We say the name is Echad, he's one. The oneness is in our blood. That's why we're called Adam. We have the oneness in our blood, which means that the human being has a level of consciousness, and this is, I don't have to tell you this. Why is it that the human being has a level of consciousness higher than the animal? Or a level of consciousness higher than the plant? Or a level of consciousness higher than the rock? Because the Aleph, the singularity, the source of everything, is embedded in our blood. And this is true of all humans. All humans are called Adam. Soon we'll get to Yisroel and the Jewish human. But that's the skinny on Hashem Echad, and why it is that we're called human.
Yeah, but animals have blood. Like, what's the?
But the Aleph is not in it. Some
But our
more
neshama's not in the
external.
blood.
Hello. Yes, some more external part of godliness is invested in it, as is invested in a rock.
Right.
Right? It's just it's not the Aleph. That's the name of everything in Lashon HaKodesh indicates what it is. So we're going to actually soon contrast a rock and a stone.
What's the relationship between blood and the rock? Because last week we were saying
Blood is the life force.
in the rock too.
No,
Didn't we
no,
say
no.
last week that domim?
No.
Like it's
Dome also means silent. It's a whole opposite meaning. This is an interesting thing. You'll see this a lot in Kabbalah and Chassidus. Words have totally opposite meanings, the same thing. Dam is blood, and dam means, like the English word dam, to be quiet, to be silent. The rock is quiet. It doesn't speak.
My question was on the fact that our neshama, the piece of Hashem that we have inside of us, was blown into us.
That's the nefesh elokiyus.
Right.
The nefesh hakayunis, the dam, the enlivening, was not blown into us. The enlivening soul, as we will in the first chapter of Tanya, the first what he did is animate, and then he blew the godly soul. So animation is in the blood. Without blood, you have no life. It carries oxygen around everywhere, etc.
So you're
You
saying
die,
that
God forbid.
that what he put into our blood is obviously just different than animals. You're saying like the
Yeah. That's why we're called Adam and not Behemoth.
okay.
Yeah.
so Adam pre-existed him getting.
Pardon me?
So-
Speak a little louder, please. You have the mic.
He had Adam, but he wasn't Adam. He was just dumb at that point, and then
No. When he. Oh, well, I mean, initially,
Yeah.
in the
That wasn't-
looking
that wasn't
gracious,
done.
absolutely, looking gracious. He
I'm not going
carved out, absolutely, he drew out the measure of a man, of a human thing in the dirt, in the doimim.
okay,
in the inanimate, this is a huge teaching in Chassidus, because, and now that you brought it up, he took the inanimate world, the world of daimon, which is dumb, nothing, right? And he put into it the aleph, right? So we, talk about who we are this strange composite of two complete extremes. No other thing in creation is built like this. Everything else was built in creation, body and soul, same time. We weren't. So that's why that will be a big teaching in terms of what our mission is and what our job is to do. Because we have every level of reality we have within us. Down to the dumbest dumb. Right? And that's within us. Okay. Any questions out there? Well, we have an actual kind of stop here. Okay, we're good.
There is a conversation going on
A
Facebook.
conversation going about what?
So somebody had asked, what tells you Chassidus holds any truth other than the emotional beauty as humans might find attractive?
Oh,
And somebody
that's a good
responded
question.
with a question to him. When a child learns the basics of math, numbers, counting, addition, subtraction, multiplication, etc., how do you explain to the child that the practical value of what that child learns before the child has mastered the
More
base?
slowly and into the mic.
I guess they
Sorry.
can't hear you.
No, that's not the mic for what she's talking about.
Let's do question number one at a time, okay?
No, but this
First question.
person's answering.
Just say it a little more slowly and into the mic.
This is too loud.
Wait, is that the air traffic controller giving instructions? What's going on?
It's somebody out in Zoom land.
Where's your Zoom going on? Where's your mic?
My mic is my phone,
Right.
and this is just picking up Bluetooth.
No, I know. So I can't really speak so much closer into your phone.
No, well, try.
Okay. Either way, so
I'll repeat the question, okay? You can hear me.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
it's way too loud. You have to lower this. It's way too loud. Okay. What tells you Chassidus? Sorry. What tells you Chassidus holds any truth other than the emotional beauty us humans might find attractive?
Why can't we stop there? No. Because you want to go with the other.
Only
other
because
question
somebody had
later?
answered the
Oh, they
question with
answered
the
the
question. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So when a
It's
child
an
learns
answer.
the basics of math, numbers, counting, addition, subtraction, multiplication, etc., how do you explain to the child the practical value of what that child learns before the child has mastered the basic language of math? So
That's an answer to the question.
it was like a question on the question, kind of like as an answer. What?
What?
Very Jewish thing.
Very
to
Jewish
do.
thing to do.
Answer
Somebody
question
explain
with
to me how
question.
that answer answers the question. What makes you think that Chassidus or anything is true rather than just cute and beautiful?
Right. Or like emotional beauty, that people think it's emotional.
Right. That's the first question.
That's
right?
the first question.
Well, the fact that it's beautiful, okay, at least the person acknowledges that, is somewhere along the way, because I think John Keats, the English poet, said, truth is beauty, beauty truth, that's all you need to know. And if you learn a little Chassidus, you know that the word for beauty is teferes, and teferes, in the structure of the 10 spheros, is the integrator between right and left. So beauty is about integration, and the more you learn Torah, the more you will see how Torah integrates everything. Now that I can only tell you from experience. I can't say, but I'll promise you, because I know it's true, and for my own learning, and I'm sure other people in this room or other people out there who have some history in terms of learning Torah will tell you that experience gives, that there's nothing like experience of learning Torah and living it to let you know that it creates a kind of harmony and a kind of balance that is beautiful, number one. And because it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, begins to become convincing in itself. That's one part of the answer. The other is and also a poet gives this answer. If seeing is believing, believing is seeing beyond. So to believe it, you have to cultivate that part of yourself which is capable of seeing beyond. the stuff higher than reason will never tell you that the Torah is true, because there's other philosophies out in the world. In fact, there's a Chazal, sages say, if a non-Jew tells you that there's wisdom in the world, believe it. If a non-Jew tells you that there's Torah, or that he has, if a non-Jew tells you, I have wisdom, believe it. If he tells you, I have Torah, don't believe it. Because Torah is not acquired through the rational faculties. You have to come on to the super-rational faculties. And then it becomes a matter of what we call faith. But it isn't blind faith. It's very insightful faith that grows. So, short answer, from a distance, looking at the Torah and reading it, you could think it's just a wisdom. Maybe not even a wisdom. Maybe you look at it and you say, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? But the experience of living Torah, and living Torah at its depth, begins over time to cultivate a sense that's beyond wisdom, that's beyond knowledge, that we call beauty.
But he's not referring to Torah. He's referring to Chassidus, in particular.
He's turning to Chassidus.
That's what the
I
question was.
understand that.
Right.
And I'm actually kind of making a joke here.
Oh.
He's not referring to the way you said it. He's not looking at Torah, he's looking at Chassidus. And what is Chassidus? What is Chassidus? So for this, we'll get a basic understanding. What is Torah? What is Torah? Torah is 4 things which are one. There's 4 letters in God's name. Yud K, Vav K. Each one has a separate existence, but they create an entity. Torah has 4 different components, which creates a singular entity. And in the language of Kabbalah itself, it's called the Pardes, the garden. Why is it called the garden? The garden of Torah. Because garden is an acronym for four levels of Torah. Pshat, that's the P in Pardes. The simple meaning, I open up the Chumash, I read it, I understand what it says. Maybe I need Rashi to help me. Fine, okay. Drush, remez. Remez is the hint. The things that are hinted in the Torah. And how do you know what they are? Because they've been interpreted by other people. Remember, there is an oral Torah, right? I mean, I have some classes where people tell me, I believe in the Torah, but I don't believe in the written Torah, in the oral Torah. Well, there's a famous historical heresy between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees also believe only in the written Torah. But the tradition of the Torah tradition is that everything that was given in the written Torah was explained to Moses on Mount Sinai, and Mount Sinai gave it over to Aaron, and Aaron to the elders, on and on and on throughout history. And though that gave rise to the next 2 levels, the second and third level of the Torah, the hinted level and the interpreted level, which is called drush, midrash. So we have pshat, remez, drush. The simple meaning of the Torah, explained by people like Rashi, as Rashi himself says, I come only to explain the simple meaning of the Torah to a 5-year-old child. The hints that are hinted at in letters and in gematrias, which have been explained by the Chachamim, all the way back to Moshe, who inherited the explanation from Mount Sinai. And the Midrashim also. Much of the Talmud is full of Midrashim. And then the last, the S in Pardes, is the Sod, which is Kabbalah. So we have Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Pardes. The Torah is a garden, and Chassidus is that part of that part which gives depth to it all. It's based primarily, you have to say, on the Sod. It's based primarily on Kabbalah. But if you learn Tanya, and I'm learning Tanya with a group of people in the morning, and one of the things we're discovering, because we have a person in the class who says, every time we say something in the Tanya, he says to me, is that Kabbalah? And more often than not, we've been quoting Tillim, we've been quoting Bereshis, we've been quoting Navi. So Tanya, Chassidus gives a depth and a light into all 4 levels. That's what Chassidus is. So that's why I just made a little face when you said Chassidus versus Torah.
Somebody disagrees with you.
I don't imagine that.
So Ari Malowitsky basically says he disagrees that Torah can't be found through reason and the rational of the Kuzari, the Sefer Haikarim, The Rambam, Rav Sadia were all rationalists. He says if you're only talking about Chassidus, then you're right.
I'm talking about, well, it's absolutely true. Those people are called philosophers. Even the Rambam is called Hakira.
Right.
There is a level of Hakira. I mean, the way I would put it, and I would agree with you in the sense that Chassidus or the beyond reason doesn't throw away reason. I didn't mean to imply that one dumps reason and gets above reason. In fact, sometimes reason can lead you to above reason. So I don't mean by any way to say that it is that there aren't parts of Torah which are rational, but Torah itself, think about it, what does Torah mean? It means teaching, hira. And what is it teaching you about? What have we been learning about God? We've been learning about something which is essentially ungraspable, unnameable, inscrutable, ineffable, all those crazy words that they use in English, right? That's what we've been learning about. You can't grasp God with, you can grasp an intelligent designer with reason. In other words, you look at something and you say, wow, that has form to it. Somebody must have given it a form, right? And if it's a universe, there must have been some intelligent, that's all about reason. That will not take you, and I will assert this pretty strongly, to Havaya, the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now the person can rebut me, but I think I'm right. Yud Kei Vav Kei is that which is above Elokim. Elokim you can get to through reason. And let me make the, again, Elokim is definitely part of the Torah. Hakira, Jewish philosophy is part of the Torah, but it's only a part of the Torah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I have a little water or something?
Yes.
It won't take you to the ayin. I'm looking later. Reason will not take you to the ayin, because the ayin is untakeable by reason. The ayin can only be taken by the heart. It's called in the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus, Ra'usa de Liba, the will or the depths of the heart. Bina Liba, it says in Zohar, Kabbalah. Bina Liba, Bina is understanding, has to go to the heart. If it doesn't go to the heart, it remains, I'll say a negative word, only rational. The super rational, the supernatural, above nature, is where God himself resides, and Chassidus is a vehicle for getting some taste of that. All right. So everything that exists, us, only words of God. He stops speaking, we go to nothing. And not only go to nothing, we go to never have been. Okay. Okay. Oh, I started with 10. Okay. Another meaning, Adam, thank you very much for reminding me. Nobody. Adam, we said about Aleph Dam. Another meaning of Adam. When he created us, he said, Nase Adam b'tzalmeinu.
Right.
Let us create man in our image. So from this, there's a relationship. Yes. Adama la'elyon. Adam means Adama. We are compared to the one on high. Adama la'elyon. We humans are structured in the same way that he structures himself to create. He constructs himself to create with 10 sayings, 10 utterances. And we have correspondingly 10 powers, from Chabad down to Malchus. I have a diagram here. I'll pass this out. This is something that most people, I'm not going to go into it at length because most people probably have seen this before. Okay? Is that visible?
I'm just showing that to everybody on the screen
Okay, I'm
over here
also
so they
showing
can
it to
see.
everybody. Right? So this is a structure of what's called the 10 spheres. From Kessler on top to Malchus below. Right? If you count Kessler, you really get 11. Because Kessler is in a world by itself. We'll just leave it at that. But if you go Chochmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, and Malchus, you get 10 spheros. Corresponding to these 10 spheros There we go. Corresponding to these 10 spheros are the human constitution. Right brain, Chokhmah. Left brain, Bina. Middle brain, Das. Right arm, Chesed. Gevurah, Tiferes. And it goes on and on. The shape of a human is the shape of God. That's what it means by we were created in His image. All right? So what do we have so far? Through all of this conversation, I think we have basically two things, maybe it's three. One, who are we? Who am I? I'm a momentary expression of God. When He stops speaking, I exist. I don't exist. Right? Fortunately, He keeps speaking, and we never ever stop existing, because even when our soul leaves our body, the spiritual part of us still exists. He's still speaking. It's just it's not in a physical manner, right? But we are expressions of God, number one. And number two, we are built in His image. Now this is going to mean a lot, because if we understand how God creates, we can understand what we're capable of, right? If we understand, we'll take Chachma. Kulam b'Chachma asisa. It's a pasuk. He made everything wisely, which Chassidus, to the guy explains, whoever it said, explains a little deeper. Not He made everything wisely, but Kulam b'Chachma asisa. He made everything with Chachma. In other words, everything that exists, no matter how small, even this rock, is an expression of God's wisdom. Nothing is done haphazardly, right? So suppose we did live like that. Suppose we lived like that. That everything we did is an expression of some kind of deepness in ourselves, which has an unfettered path to come out in everything we did. That would be a godly, manifest godly way of existence. So, just we'll touch on that. We'll get into it further when we start talking about deeper how we can become the best that we can become. But first, let's understand what tools we have. The tools we have are the 10 powers that reflect, one for one, the same powers that God uses to create everything. Kulam b'Chachma asisa. So these are the 10
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. The 10 powers that we have, if they're corresponding to the 10 spheros, so each sphera is corresponding to a midah that we have that we can then utilize.
Correct.
That's how we need to.
Correct. A
Okay.
midah, or I would say capability, because Chachma and Bina and Das are not midah. But yeah, every sphere, every power we have corresponds to a particular divine capability, or expression. So with these 10 utterances back to God, so these 10 utterances are the root of all creation, right? And it rolls out, as we're about to see, this creation. There are a lot more things than 10 things in the world, right? How does that happen? So we're going to learn now how that happens. These 10 utterances evolve into infinite number of things. So we have an infinite capability within us also. Because, keep in mind though, it's a singular expression I think that's best to keep in mind, that as you said, we're Adam Elyon, we're compared to the Most High. Everything, and this is why this chapter, this piece of Tanya, is to me so revelatory about who we are, even though it's not really on the page, so to speak. Since we're Adam Elyon, everything that we're going to say in this piece about God will apply in some way to us to get to know ourselves. So God has 10 memoirs. Shebehen nivra ha'aretz, with which He created the earth. B'sheshis yemei bereshis, 6 days of creation correspond to the 6 midos: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. It even, I've observed over the course of thinking about this for a few many years, it also corresponds even close to the English days of the month, up to a point. I haven't been able to take it past Tuesday. Sunday. What does the sun do? The sun radiates. It pours out rays. That's called chesed. When a person gives out, pours out, gives of him or herself, extends him or herself with no holes, that's like a sun irradiating the world. Monday is in French it's called lundi. Mon and lundi are connected with the moon. The moon is a receiver, and it's a reflector. So the moon doesn't shine on its own. In fact, it's dark on its own, but it will reflect light. And that's the midah of Gevurah, the midah of constraint and darkness. So, as I said, I haven't been able to get past Wednesday. I asked around, nobody's helped me. Maybe everyone here can help me. Thursday. Thursday I know comes from a Greek god, a Scandinavian god called Thor. So we won't go there. And Friday I know comes we're free. The work day is over. We're going to party. And Saturday comes from Saturn. But none of that helps with this, right? We're all,
I can make something up for Wednesday.
well,
Okay, the beginning of it is wed.
wed.
Wed, when two people are wed, there's three.
Oh, three. That's
things
Tiferes.
Tiferes.
Excellent. All right, good. I'll take
I
it.
just made that up.
Okay. But the 6 days of the week correspond to the 6 days of creation. And the seventh day, of course, is Shabbos, which corresponds to the midah of Malchus, of kingship. The seventh of the seven midas, if you count Malchus. Okay. Again, this is just a roadmap at the moment. Mapping God's expression to our expression. Hopefully will become deeper as we go. Not only deeper, but more usable, hopefully, as we go. That's what I decided. We'll do this class. If it gets to a point where it's just abstract, we'll go somewhere else. But if it becomes something that I hope it can become, which is some tools that we can take, then it will be worthwhile to pursue. Okay, so 6 days of the creation. If he were to stop speaking, these 10 Maimoros and the 6 days of creation, so these 6 days of creation were called Yemei Bereshis, the days of creation. Now I have to stop here and say something about Bereshis. Look at the word Bereshis. After the Beis comes Resh Aleph Shin, which means what?
Isha.
Come on, somebody out there.
Oh, Aish, fine.
Huh?
Aleph Shin?
No,
Aish.
Resh Aleph Shin.
Oh, Reish.
What's Resh?
Head. Beginning.
So, Bereshis. In his head, there are many ways that Chassidus, which I hope eventually we'll all understand is part of Torah, that Chassidus explains Bereshis many ways. So, Be'in, like Bebayas, the person is in the house. So you could say Bereshis in his head. In his head is where the creation starts. Well, isn't that where everything starts in your head too? Mm. Everything starts with your head. You're thinking, and something pops into your head. So that's the beginning of a possible creation. So the other explanation, Bereshis, is Bishvil Yisroel, for the sake of the Jewish people who are called his head. Where is it called? It's a pasuk in Chumash that calls the Jewish people Bereshis Tivuasai, the head of his produce. So from there, that's Midrash, by the way. And Midrash tells us that we can understand the Jewish people as somehow predominant in God's head, to the extent that the whole purpose of creation is for the sake of the 613 mitzvahs with which the Jewish people have been given, for which the Jewish people have been given the responsibility to utilize those mitzvahs to rectify the world. But that's later down the road in our story. So if everything that he said in Bereshis, that was in his head, were to go back to absolutely, here again, ayin and ephes, mamish, as was before, meaning deeper in his essence than the external speech with which he created. And this is what the Arizal writes. The Arizal writes, Shagam b'daimi mamish, in inanimate, here we go with daim. Here it means inanimate, blood. It means blood, but it means silent. In the case of a silent thing, like a stone, kamehavonim, like stones, ve'ofer, and dirt, umayim, and water, these are inanimate things. So the Arizal tells us that since everything that exists only because of an effusion of godliness which is continually breathed, tucked into it, that's the right metaphor. So even a rock and all of these other things, yesh bechinas nefesh, has something that we call a soul. nefesh. It has some enlivening, a force which enlivens it and keeps it in a state of being. Again, if that force, that speech were to be retracted, that rock would go back to the ayin, just like we would go back to the ayin. So that rock has a nefesh, v'chayis ruchnius. It has spiritual energy in it, because nothing can exist without the spiritual, godly energy, which is the source of all creation. So a rock also has enclosed in it letters of God's speech, from the 10 Ma'asora Maimoros, from the 10 utterances, Hamachayis Ahavas Yisroel, which brings life and existence into the inanimate world, Lies Yesh Ma'ayin, that it should become a something from the ineffable allness, which is nothing, Ve'efes Shalifnei Sheshis Mebereshis, and the nothingness which had the appearance of absolutely nothing before the 6 days of creation, because they were all only in Godhead and not yet spoken. Now, even though stone, there's only 10 Maimoros, right? And there's an infinite number of stuff. So where does this Evan come from? And this Evan is a godly thing like everything else. It's not mentioned in the 10 Maimoros, Torah, in the Torah. Nevertheless, Nimshach Chayis LeEvan, the life force that's in the stone is drawn to it through combinations and transformations of letters, Hamizgalgales, Galgal, which literally roll through into Resh Lamed Aleph Sha'orim, into the 231 gates.
How would you explain cloning?
I'm not sure why you're asking that. I mean, it's a something from something. It's like making a
No,
cup
I
from a
know,
cup.
but
It's not Yeshua.
is it still the same
Cloning,
life force?
sure.
Is it still the same life force?
No. The same life force as what? I mean, nothing can exist without the life force being within it. But you're saying, what did I say about cloning versus something else?
Okay, no. What? Okay, let me speak it out because it's in my
Yeah.
head and I need to. Okay. Whatever.
I don't know where she's going.
No,
Okay,
no, she's
whatever
right.
Hashem
Let's hear it.
created, right?
Yeah.
He created from the beginning and he continually creates it. Correct?
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun, right? In Chadash Tachas Hashemesh. So yes, cloning is taking something from something. I'm saying, but it's not the original form.
Right. You can change the form. He's going to have a mashal here about taking a lump of silver and changing it into a cup. A beautiful cup. It's yesh me'yesh. A clone is yesh me'esh, yesh me'esh. The original thing, if you're talking about creation, is a yesh me'ayin.
Is that why the Goylem was not able to really talk?
I can't tell you why the golem wasn't able to talk.
Is that why what?
The
He wants to
Goylem.
know, is that why the golem couldn't talk? He wasn't given the power of speech by God. But
Right,
I know
because
very
he didn't
little.
have an neshama blown into him. He wasn't like,
He wasn't a medaber.
right,
He wasn't a medaber.
okay.
He wasn't really an Adam. He was looking like an Adam. He was given the power to behave like an Adam looked. But he wasn't really an Adam. Because an Adam has the Aleph within it. And an Adam is a diva, a mezdaber, is a speaking thing. Okay? So, we're,
Before we go forward, you mentioned 231 gates.
I'm about to explain that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, actually, I'm not about to explain it. The Sefer Yetzirah, this book, the book of creation, right? The book of creation. Sefer Yetzirah is a collection of, what do you call it? Well, you'll open it as collection of items whose source is Abraham our father. It was written down, of course, much later. Just like the oral Torah's source is God and Moses, but didn't get written down until thousands of years later. So this book, Sefer Yetzirah, is the Kabbalah of Abraham. Right? And I explained once before, I'll be very brief because I don't want to bore people who've heard this before. God God infused knowledge into this first human being, this Adam, which was the knowledge of everything. And I'll go out on a limb here for those who are skeptics and tell you something you could be skeptical about, which is that everything which is ever going to be known is known in the Torah already, by definition, because it comes from essence of God. It may not have been yet found. In other words, we find that there are Talmidim, people who study the Torah, and in every generation they bring something to the surface that had not been brought to before. I mean, Chassidus itself emerged at the time of the Baal Shem Tov. Kabbalah itself emerged pretty much at the time of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, at the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara. But the knowledge was in the world, and the knowledge was transmitted from God to Adam, from Adam to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, and Noah set up an academy, a yeshiva, in which he taught the knowledge of everything, which Abraham learned and which is embedded in his book, Sefer Yetzirah. So, in Sefer Yetzirah, amongst many other things, is a chart. Can you see this chart? I'll show it first here. And you don't have to see it close. It's a combination of letters. It starts there. It's a chart, 11 wide, 11 rows, by
What page?
what page?
What
And say,
page?
oh, you have the book? Page 114. Yeah, page 114. It's 11 across, and it's 21 down. 11 times 21 is 231.
40. 31?
Reish Lamed Aleph.
Oh, it's because,
Reish Lamed Aleph.
right. Did I
Very
show you the
fun,
diagram
230.
that Rachel Yudkoff makes, like the artwork that she does on the 231 gates?
Sure,
Never
but
showed that to
I just want to first explain it because some of you are far away. There's many ways that this is understood. So, for instance, there are different configurations of the 231. But here's an Aleph Beis, Gimel Daled, Hey Vav, and it goes across like that. The next word, the next level, instead of Aleph Beis, goes Aleph Gimel, and then Hey Zion, and it progresses like that. Now comes something that I only discovered 2 days ago. From opening the book, I knew the chart was in the book, but I did not know that. Let me look at it. Oh, if you take the word Yisroel, Jewish person, Yud, Sin, Resh, Ayin, Lamed. So the early Kabbalists told us you could break that in two. Instead of Yud Sin, it's Yud Shin, just change the dot. Yesh, Ra'el is just change the letters around. You get Resh, Lamed Aleph. A Jewish person is somebody who's built like this, with 231 combination. Yisroel. Where's it from? I'm not sure if it says here. It's on, let me just not spend much time on this. He says, according to early Kabbalists, but he doesn't say who, the 231 gates are alluded to in the name Israel. As I just said, Israel is spelled Yud, Sin, Resh, Aleph, Lamed. So you take it Yud, Shin, and instead of Resh, Aleph, Lamed, it's Resh, Lamed, Aleph. And it's so. So we now get a little bit toward the Jewishness, right? That was our subject, I think. Jewish identity. So basically, we finished a chapter. First chapter of most of this one page has been what is being a human? Adam ala Elyon, Aleph Dam, 10 spheros, 10 powers, right? That's reflective of God. And now the Shema, of course, says Shema Yisroel. Shema is a Jewish prayer, right? That's what this started with, right? The whole purpose of Shaar V'Emunah is that we started above to understand the Shema. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu and Baruch Shem Kavod, which is particularly something that we Jews have to deal with. Okay, now you wanted to show something?
No, I was saying that a friend of mine, Rachel Yudkoff, she's an artist and a designer, and she created more of a circular form of the 231 gates.
Okay.
And it's really beautiful. I'll show it to you after the class,
Okay,
the
fine.
pictures of it
Good.
and everything.
So what did he say here on the page that got us to all this? He said, excuse me, that how do we get to stone? We get to stone like we get to the myriad of everything else by combinations, transformations of all the letters. And he'll explain stone, for one. Because there are, as he says, the letters roll around. They're misgalgalis. A galgal is a gal is something round, like the planets are called galid. They're round things, galgal. And all the letters roll around in these 231 gates. Pani va'achar, they go front to back to front, and they're all mixed up, and you get a very large number of things from this. Okay, as is written, he quotes now, Kamosha b'Sefer Yetzirah, as is written in Sefer Yetzirah, which we just showed you. Ad, to the point, Achemishtal Shel Ma'asura Mamoris, until they're sort of their little shell is a chain. There chains out, there evolves, there comes out of this from the 10 Maimoris, v'nimshach mahen, and is drawn from these 10 Maimoris, or think 10 powers that we have. We have infinite combinations based on these 10 powers and all the different combinations of the 22 letters and all the different powers of everything. Think of everything you could say and then say, take it all. You say we fill the room with everything I just said, or anybody just said. You could take all those words and recast them into a whole other saying. It's amazing. And it's beyond amazing. It's infinite. So we have an infinite capability, just like God has an infinite capability. And for instance, in one set of his infinity, combination is Nimshach Mahen Sirav Shem Evan. Evan. Now what can you say about an Evan? I told you the name of a thing shows something about it. So Evan, and Aleph is one. Now Ben, a lot of things you could say about Ben, but Ben is the root of binyan, to build. So what do you build with? Stones. This is before steel and girders, right? Now Yaakov Avinu built this, he took stones in the desert, and he put the stones together. The Aleph, godliness, is even in the stone, the things that you build with. So if godliness is in concrete and mortar, it's certainly in us. And we are a much more complex and somewhat intelligent state of being that can do things with them. That's why we can make things with stones. Now these letters, Aleph, Bez, and Nun, Hu Chiyusei Shel HaEvan, it's the life force of the stone. Stone has to have some life force, otherwise it can't exist. V'chein b'chol ha'nevroim sheba'olam. And similarly it is with all creatures in the world, including us human beings. Hashemesh v'nikroim b'hem, the name which we're called Adam, or Yisroel, right, the Jewish human. The name which that entity is called, B'lashon HaKodesh, in the holy tongue, Hein Oisis Adibur, these are, the name of everything in Hebrew is a combination of Hebrew letters, and it's with the Hebrew letters that Hashem has created. Now I'll give you an example that some people have heard before. The name of God himself. It's Yud Kei Vav Kei. And this is explained in Tanya. The Yud is a dot. God takes his allness and contracts himself into a dot. That's called, in the expression of Kabbalah, he hides his light and creates an empty space, the Yud. And from that contraction, that initial contraction into a point, he extrudes a form which is a Hey, which has height and breadth. That's the letter Hey. So from a point of conception, something that has breadth and height emerges. That's the beginning of creation. Something that has some kind of a form. And once that form takes shape, now we get, that's a horizontal structure, width and breadth. It takes a vertical twist, which is the Vav. All the layers of worlds, infinite layers of worlds, until you come out to another level of expansion, which is the second Hey. So the letters, I hope you can picture this in what I'm saying, the letters are pictograms of God's process of creation. That make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes? Okay. Okay out there?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the stone is a pictogram. The letters tell the story about what it really is. Now I'm not expert by any means in this. I know pretty much. I'm a beginner, so I can't tell you. Okay, give me a word. I'll tell you where it comes from. But he's told us about Evan. These letters, Aleph and then Ben, and even the shape of them, indicate its life force of the thing itself, the stone. The second line, which means us as well, all creations in the world. Hashemish and the Kroim, third line down below, all the names that they have in the Holy Tongue, these are the letters of speech, of God's speak, which descend from one level to another, from the 10 utterances, Torah and the Torah, through permutations, transformations, combinations of the letters, as they roll out in the Reish Lid Amid Sha'or in the 231 gates. Until some combination finds a resting place in a particular thing, like an Adam or like a stone. To enliven it. And these letters, remember, these letters are God's expression. They're energetics of godliness being extended outward from his essence. They're channels of energy. And therefore, they are not only indicative of what the thing is, they actually are the forces of life which are within them. So we look this way, the way we look, with our 10 powers. That's the way the combo has created this 10-powered thing called a human. But the combo is also investing the life into every one of the 10 components that we have, from the right side of our brain down to our toes. This is who we are, fundamentally. Now the reason it has to happen this way, this condensation, contraction, all these transformations, is because it's impossible for the creatures to take and receive the life force directly from it. There's a continual tzimtzum, there's a continual contraction, because godliness is by definition above any containment. So it's a very big trick that he does, so to speak, that he finds a way to shrink himself into a nothing. Now, this is just a metaphor. He's still the God that he is, but he shrinks his emanation so that it's gone, and what's left is just a trace of himself. And then he infuses some of his emanation, because it's like the metaphor that's given in Chassidus, is the sun is the emanator, and that's a metaphor for God himself. God is the emanator. And by the way, the essence of God isn't even an emanator. Emanator is when he decides to emanate. So before that, he's essential and is not even an emanator. But we'll take this from the perspective of it's hard to say moment, but from that place where he decides to emanate, he's called the emanator, like the sun is an emanator. And just like we can't look at the sun directly without some shade, we can't experience that. There has to be some shade. And the shade is the letters. Contracting, contracting, contracting. Into the first of 10 Maimoros of the Torah, because the chayas which comes from them is very great, ma'oid ma'oid, very big. So when there's 10, it has to get further diminished, further contracted, so that creatures can contain it. So it has to go down into the level of the very protein, specific creatures. And they can't take the chayas directly, the life force directly, only when the vitality descends, umistalshal, and rolls down, from one level to another, each one pasuchum imenu, each one at a lower level, with the many transformations of the letters. The gematries is also, every letter has a numerical value. So the numbers also can come into play here. Shehein cheshbon ha'osis, the gematries is the numerical value of letters. Until such a point when those life forces are able to contract to such an extent, to create, to be enclosed in and create a particular creature. and the contraction of the letter becomes the creature's name. Odom, human, a contracted state of godliness. Asher Yikra Leibel Lashon HaKodesh, which is the name as it is in Hebrew, and that name is a keli, is a vessel. It's a channel for L'Hayus Hatzimtzumim, for the life force which is very contracted in these letters of this name, of Shem Zeh, Shenishtalsum Asura Amoris, which descended from the 10 utterances of the Torah, Sheyesh Behem Koyach V'Chayas, because the letters of the Torah have the power to bring into being and make live a creation. Yesh Me'ayin, the creations of something from nothing, not only to bring it into being, but to enliven it, La'olam, forever, because, as the Zohar tells us, the Torah, which is God's articulation, right? And the articulation, we've called at length here, are the energetics which create everything. That Torah, which is his articulation, is one with him. So there's no one of us at this real or virtual table who is anything but a part of God. That's tonight's lesson. First step, who we are. And then we have to understand, okay, I'm a part of God. How do I do with it? How do I realize it? How do I feel it? Any hanging out questions?
No, somebody added on to what they were saying before, just it is true that the Creator cannot be explained through reason. He did, however, create reason for a purpose, and that is to grasp through rational tools that there is a transcendent cause and the nature of Hashem's relationship with the physical universe. That's the focus of Shaar Yichud V'Emunah.
That's
so I guess
beautiful.
Somebody...
Yes, see what you did there, and you did it very nicely. The purpose of reason is to grasp that there's something beyond reason.
Right.
In Chassidus, that's called Bina. That's what Bina is. It's expressed by many of the Rebbeim. I'm thinking particularly of the Rabbi Rashab. That Bina is, in his expression, to understand something from within something. And what does it mean? To understand, from the thing that you understand, that there are things beyond your understanding. So absolutely, Seichel is a gateway to the transcendent.
Right.
But God himself is transcendent. And we can only understand him through the negativity. He is that which we believe is real and is beyond our understanding. Very nice. Same person?
Yeah, no, that was the one that answered with a question the first time.
That's right.
Going
The
back.
purpose of rationality, the ultimate purpose, well, first of all, there are transient reasons for rationality. If you want to know how to make a boat, you've got to think it through, right?
Right.
If you want to know how to raise a child, you have to think it through, etc.
Yeah.
Rationality has a big plus. It's not only a throwaway, as that person said, it's also a gateway to what transcends the rational.
Right. Okay, I'm going to end it here because I want to show you.
Okay.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining.
thanks. And we'll see where we're going to go next week. Okay?
Okay.
The same topic. I'm convinced we're going to do the same topic, but I'm not sure what piece of Chassidus
So I
we'll
want
use
to
for
just show you what Rachel
bye-bye.
does.
Bye-bye.
I've seen her artwork